Well, welcome back to Insight Into Iceland, your daily 2021 Mid-Season Invitational recap. I'm feeling a little, I don't know, Cloud9 lost to Detonation Focus Me, and it's not just that they lost, it's the way they lost. It's going to be a lot of the discussion today, a lot of the topic. I don't want to dwell on it too long, but obviously big mistakes all over the place. Not just the Blabber First Blood, but, that did break apart a lot of their game plan. They didn't set up very well for some of the objective fights where they should have been able to use their poke. Didn't defend from the flanking opportunities as well as they could have. It's just the fact that Dead FM gave them lots of opportunities to come back after they were so far behind, and Dead FM made lots of mistakes too. And Cloud9 just couldn't capitalize on that. So it's really, really disappointing from them. I'm not going to mince words on that. But tomorrow's another day, and we'll see what happens, and they can still, get it back together and get out of this group. I sure hope they get out of this group, or that's going to be, we'll see what happens. As an NA fan and an NA analyst, it's not a feels-good day today for that. But let's move on with the rest of this. So the overall recap today, and you can read the written version of this with the game recaps and all the takeaways on oracle.elixir.com. And I'll put the link for that in the show notes in the description for this video. But Pentanet went up against RNG, and RNG stomped them. Then UOL went up against RNG. RNG stomped them too. Damwon stomped Infinity. And then we moved on to the actual interesting part of the day, which wasn't really supposed to be that interesting. So Dead FM, they beat Cloud9. They had, they did some positive things too. I don't want to, take away from what they did. They punished Cloud9's mistakes. They made some good engage plays. Good job for them. They got their snowball. They almost threw away that snowball, but they found a way to close it out too. So good work. Then we had probably the most interesting game of the day in terms of the actual level of play and how close and back and forth it was. Wildcats against Mad Lions. Mad Lions had a good lead at one point in some different places. Karzi and Kaiser were doing really well in the bottom lane. Elyoya had some bad dives that got punished that didn't work out the way he obviously intended, not set up that well. But then Mad Lions found a way. They got a pick in the mid lane and started taking turrets in all three lanes. They really exploded their mid game gold lead. It swung back the other way. Wildcats found a big ace in the bottom lane, took the lead back. And we're actually playing the map pretty well. I thought they were moving around to different lanes and kind of, especially when Mad got that Baron the first time, and then Wildcats were, playing on different lanes, finding pressure points to kind of trade, which you shouldn't really be able to trade objectives evenly against a Baron, but they did a really good job of that and rotating, and Mad Lions left that a little bit exposed. But ultimately, Mad Lions had a much better 5v5 comp, a lot easier to execute at least. And they just made the game about the Barons and, 5v5 us at Baron, and Wildcats couldn't find a way to kind of outplay them in those fights. So that was a really interesting game. I thought it was a pretty good one on both sides. And then finally we had Pain Gaming against PSG Talon, and PSG, went back to what was happening the first three games of the day, and just destroyed them. So that was the recap on the day. Hopefully the schedule for tomorrow will be, a little more balanced and interesting. We have RNG playing UOL again, and then UOL Pentanet. So that UOL Pentanet game will be really important for starting to decide who might get out of that group second. Damwon and Dead FM, probably going to run them over. C9 Infinity is suddenly a much more interesting game than it kind of should be on paper. Mad should destroy Pain Gaming, but we'll see. And PSG Wildcats could actually be an interesting game. So a couple of games tomorrow that should be kind of good to watch. Some takeaways from today. So I think the Group C is becoming kind of interesting. PSG look like they are pretty clearly the second best team in the group, but a lot of things could still happen, and obviously Pain Gaming and Wildcats are positioning to try to knock them down. There was an interesting quote in the media scrum from the Wildcats coach after their game today, where he was asked about Pain Gaming, what he feels about them, and he said that he doesn't think he thinks they would struggle to reach the playoffs in the TCL. But of course, that's coming after Pain already kind of stole a game or beat Wildcats on day one. So their next match should be really interesting. I don't know if that quote will make its way, become some bulletin board material for Payne, but I hope it does, and I hope that those teams kind of slug it out and really try to defend their honor. Obviously there's the games that I've already spoken about a little bit, with Cloud9 losing to Dead FM, Mad Lions playing a lot closer with Wildcats than I think a lot of people might have expected to happen. Although some people were saying, I think there's been some weird sentiment out there in certain corners that Mad Lions are actually a terrible team and not good at all, which is just, that's not accurate. I think they're a pretty good team, even if they're not as experienced internationally as some of the other EU teams that could have been here. But I think ripping on them is not very well placed criticism. But underselling Wildcats and sleeping on them is also not that wise. And I think these teams can play some good games. So I think that kind of showing that gap between the kind of the minor regions and the major regions is getting closer and closer every year. And I think those games are showing it. Whether it's because of NA and EU falling off a little bit relative to historical performance, I think it's part of it, but also the level of these other leagues increasing and rising to match them. So it's there's pressure, push and pull pressure on that all around, and it's definitely interesting to see. And meanwhile, China and Korea are just sweeping through everybody so far. So hopefully somebody can stand up to them and close that side of the gap as well. I thought it was interesting in the other media scrum today. So they're doing kind of 2 media scrums per day, and then you can also request one-on-one interviews, but I'm mostly just attending the scrums. There was Solid Snake from Infinity, and he got kind of a standard question, I think, and gave kind of a standard answer, but it kind of leads into a bit of a larger discussion. And so he was asked kind of what the difference is going from domestic play to international, and he said it's really about, hey, we make these mistakes that we get away with at home, but here they get punished a lot harder. And so we make one mistake, but instead of setting us a teeny bit behind or being a missed opportunity, it might actually lose us the game. And that's something that you often hear when you increase the level of play. Suddenly you didn't realize that these were mistakes, and then they get exploited and punished, and you get set behind. And I think that way of approaching the conversation is very common. And I think it stems out of something that I've spoken about before, of coaching and review, and just the understanding of the game is very mistakes based. At this level, and it's, I think there's a good reason for that you are always thinking about optimizing, right? Like people tend to think of it as there is a correct way to do this. You have this team comp, they have that team comp, this is the game state, you should, the correct thing to do is this, this, and this. And people tend to approach it that way. So therefore, if you didn't do the correct thing, everything you did that was not part of that correct approach was a mistake. So the whole approach to the game becomes about identifying how well are you able to identify the correct thing, and then how well are you able to execute that correct thing, and then talking about your mistakes in identification and your mistakes in execution. I think there is another way to approach the whole topic, though, and kind of flip that around and talk about opportunities, right? Like, we have the opportunity to do this, this, and this, and how well do you see opportunities and go and pursue them? And I think that can be a much more productive or at least a more positive way to approach the conversation. I'm speaking in big generalities, so I'm not saying that this is necessarily going to work if you go in and start coaching a team this way. But I know there are a lot of coaches out there who have identified that there's a lot of negativity in coaching review and so on. Like, they'll play a scrim, and then all they do afterwards is talk about mistakes and, hey, you made this mistake, you made this mistake, you made this mistake, next time don't make those mistakes. And they're realizing that can be, I imagine it's draining mentally, but I also think that it's not necessarily the most conducive to improvement, to actually identifying next time around, I'm not going to be in those exact same sets of scenarios. I need to actually see what are the opportunities that I can go and pursue this thing and create a positive gain. And I think being able that sometimes gets discussed as visualization, being able to visualize an opportunity for something. If I do this, it's going to play out this way. Is that good or bad? If I do this, it's going to play out that way. Is that good or bad? This is language that, for example, when I talk to Kelsey Moser, she uses that language quite a bit. And I appreciate that a lot. So this is just a bit of a rambling kind of overarching view idea of the ways to think about and approach the game. And I thought that kind of standard question and standard answer was something that gave a little bit of insight into it. And I think you could discuss that topic a lot and for a very long time with a lot of people. So, and final takeaway, I think, just seeing RNG stomp both of their games today so hard, and knowing that we're going to get 6 games of that group on the last day when they play out the rest of Group A. It's really unfortunate. There's going to be the Unicorns of Love Pentanet game to try to decide kind of who comes out in second at the end of it, maybe, or hopefully it won't be decided too early on before that. But it just, again, it's so sad that the Vietnamese team couldn't be here and make that group a lot more interesting. And, it's just the way it is, and we're going to have to deal with that the rest of this tournament. But, we'll pass on to the next stage before too long, and hopefully things will be a lot closer, and hopefully Cloud9 will be part of that next stage. But we'll have to see it. They've got to, I hope they're able to keep their mental together. The coaching staff has a bit of a task on that front to say, look, we're not, just because we dropped this game, it doesn't mean we're out of things here, and we don't have to all fall to infighting and blame each other, whatever. Keep their mental game together and move on from there. So those are the thoughts from day 2 of MSI, and this has been Insights into Iceland. Tune in tomorrow. There'll be more games, and I'll be back with another day of recaps.